Matt Sager with what I hope is not news, but a simple fact of life. There's not going to be a new comic book day this Wednesday. There's not likely to be one for the immediate future. Comics were, contrary to what you see on film and on TV, the actual printed comic has been on life support since, I would say, 2015 or so. The current global health crisis really expedited the demise of the comic book and the comic book store. Hopefully both of them will see a resurgence when the crisis passes, but it's impossible to say. For the details of comics' seeming demise, its roots pre-crisis, boy that's a comic book expression if ever there was one, and what the possible future might hold, I would point you to many YouTube channels which have already covered this pretty exhaustively. A simple search in your YouTube app or on youtube.com could point you to some very helpful videos that are already out there, and I'll do one of those myself in the coming days. A narrative of comics, their rise after the crash in the 90s, through a sort of middling, mediocre bunch of years in the 2010s, a very swift descent before this awful crisis, and of course the terrible, crashing realities of the global health pandemic and its effect on comic publishers, comic creatives, and most importantly, comic stores. In the wake of New Comic Day, there's a new hashtag that's trending that I love, something that I honestly thought was a good idea, this too, pre-crisis. A hashtag called NTYNCBD. NCBD was New Comic Book Day. This new one is New to You Comic Book Day, and I think this is a great idea and have for some time because I'm not trying to show off my geek card and wave it in everybody's face, but comic book films, the overall acceptance and embracing of comics in the mainstream media culture have led to a lot of new comic fans, an influx of new fans, and being a newcomer to comics is like, it's daunting. I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that mockingly. There is a mythology dating back to the 1930s and having been rebooted many times. So if you're a fan of Marvel, which reality are we in? Which age are we in? Or if you're reading DC comics, is it the Golden Age Flash? Is it the Silver Age Flash? Is it the post-Flashpoint Flash? Like, there is a lot to take in. And I don't look down my nose, as sadly some people do, on newcomers. I would say welcome newcomers, and even long-time, like 30-year-plus fans. It's impossible to have kept up with all the amazing releases. There's just not enough time in the day in one's life. So I'm going to periodically, and I plan on continuing this, by the way, after this crisis passes, do some new-to-you comic book reviews. Really quick ones. Suggestions, really, more than overall reviews. Pointing you to collections of great stories which you may have missed. When possible, attaching an Amazon link so you can buy it. That's what I'll be doing today. FYI, it is an Amazon affiliate link. So full disclosure, if you do buy this book, I'll make, 9 cents. I think 4% of your purchase, possibly less. I'm not doing this for money, folks. I am doing this because I do love comics, and I think lots of people might be sleeping on some real gems. In this case, I'll be talking about Marvel Masterworks Avengers, Volume 19. It's a pretty big volume. It includes Avengers number 189 through number 202. Primarily, these stories are written by David Michelinie, a fantastic writer who you may know from the Avengers, you may know from his work on Spider-Man, Iron Man. He's a very prolific writer for both Marvel and DC, mostly known for his Marvel work. This is him at his peak. The book actually starts with a fill-in, conceived by Michelinie, but actually written by Stephen Grant, featuring marital problems between the Vision and Scarlet Witch. Always interesting, always a fascinating relationship, and one that's probably on a lot of people's minds right now, with WandaVision coming soon to Disney+. Also some interesting stuff with the Falcon and Captain America, again, Disney+ stuff, and always interesting characters. Thor departing the Avengers for a while. Hawkeye getting a new job because it turns out the Avengers pays crap, and also he's put on leave. And the Avengers fighting with annoying government officials, specifically a couple of rogue S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who've got a problem with Captain America doing their job better than they did, but especially just the personification of government red tape, jackassery, a longtime Avengers nemesis, and just ultimate buzz-cut military dickhead, Henry Peter Gyrick. It's illustrated by John Byrne, who is already hitting his peak. Byrne, just an amazing artist at all times, whether it's on the Avengers, X-Men, his seminal work on the Fantastic Four, he just always rules. The second issue also, once again, I know this is primarily a Michelinie book, but Stephen Grant takes writing duties for issue 190 as well, again penciled by John Byrne, this time featuring the Grey Gargoyle taking on the Avengers, and also Daredevil, who happens to be already on hand in his civilian identity of Matt Murdock. He's part of the Avengers legal team representing them in this Senate subcommittee hearing, being investigated due to their beef with Gyrick and S.H.I.E.L.D. This fight with the Grey Gargoyle featuring Daredevil extends into issue 191. still illustrated by John Byrne, but this time Michelini is in the writer's seat, where he remains for most of the rest of the book. A great conclusion to a great story arc. Not quite a one and done, but a two and done. A very good two-parter. Michelini also writes issue 192. This time it's illustrated by Arvell Jones. It was suggested to Michelini by some Marvel Comics Pittsburgh fan club, and so it takes place in Pittsburgh. It's called Steel City Nightmare, and it is a pretty good story, and another two-parter. Part 2 is written by Michelini, but the Pittsburgh Comics Club gets a plot assist credit. This time the art's done by Sal Buscema, a long-time famous, not just Marvel artist, but almost a personality within the bullpen. They used to call him Our Pal Sal. More action in a Pittsburgh steel mill. Very much a book of its time, when steel mills were still a big thing, when there was not a crisis gripping America, causing every industry, and certainly steel, to come to a grinding halt. Issue 194 is one of those very rare filler books that acknowledges the fact that it's a filler issue, and in fact wears that on its sleeve with pride. It's actually called Interlude, and that's exactly what it is. But even as, again, a so-called filler issue, it moves the plot forward in so many ways, puts so many characters on directions that you're going to be feeling for many issues, in some cases months and years to come. It's a very important issue. Written by Michelini and illustrated by George Perez, so it's beautiful. Boy, does it set up action, much of which pays off immediately in issue 195, where the Avengers find themselves fighting for their lives in a mental hospital run by criminals and introducing a brand new villain, another one who's about to make a big Marvel Cinematic Universe splash as he debuts in the Black Widow movie. I'm referring to Taskmaster. Another one written by Michelini and illustrated by George Perez, setting up 196, where we really get to meet and see Taskmaster in action, figure out how badass he actually is, learn about his secret to mimicking any Avengers' abilities, or any villain's abilities for that matter, and his role at that time in the Marvel Universe as mainly a trainer for and recruiter of henchmen for supervillains. The question, where do all these villains get all their henchmen from, was the basis for the brilliant idea of Taskmaster, a character created by Michelini. And again, this is someone you're going to be seeing a lot of. First of all, if you continue to read Marvel Comics, he's a major player. And again, he's getting set to make his Marvel Cinematic Universe debut as a big bad in the Black Widow movie, coming soon. Issues 197 and 198, a lot of two-parters in this volume, are slightly silly but also fun. Written by Michelini with art by Carmen Infantino, 197 introduces us to a character from Marvel's Godzilla comics they were publishing at the time, Red Ronin. It also introduces us to a honestly very disturbing storyline, one that nobody at Marvel, Michelini included, is really proud of, nor should they be. It involves the character we now know as Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. At the time, she was known as Ms. Marvel, and this storyline frankly sucks. I'm just gonna say it. If you've got any respect for women, if you are a woman, it's likely to make you extremely uncomfortable, this storyline. Fortunately, it comes and goes rather quickly, mercifully. Frankly, I prefer the Red Ronin action. This continues through to issue 198, written by Michelini and illustrated by the always amazing George Perez. Red Ronin, this mecha designed to fight Godzilla, has been taken over by an actually well-meaning supervillain. He's kind of like an early version of Ozymandias from Watchmen. He wants to save the world from war and greed by being a villain and terrorizing and possibly killing a whole bunch of people. In his mind, it's worth it. It's easy to sort of disregard and not think about the greater ramifications of this mindset because it takes place inside a big, goofy mecha who again exists to fight Godzilla. These issues are a little bit weird. Again, there's more stuff with Captain Marvel, at the time Ms. Marvel's pregnancy, and that just keeps getting worse. The fight with Red Ronin and the villain driving him ends with issue 199, again written by Michelini with art by George Perez. And now we arrive at issue 200 and the climax to the incredibly creepy, very disturbing Ms. Marvel pregnancy storyline. It's as good an issue as it can be, considering the very disturbing plot. Carol Danvers, who has been pregnant for something like 3 weeks, gives birth to a full-grown adult. Who the adult is and what his role is in the Avengers, it's all very creepy. Michelini talks about this a little bit in the introduction, saying that essentially the plan for Carol Danvers getting pregnant and giving birth was something very different and much less offensive and gross than what actually happened, but for reasons unknown to him, another writer on another Marvel title, he doesn't say which writer or which title, at the exact same time this book was getting ready to go to press, basically He doesn't say they stole his idea, but he says that they perhaps coincidentally published the exact idea that he was going to run with. And so, pressed for time, and with help from the at the time always present and now kind of a classic Marvel villain, then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, they came up with the idea that we see bear fruit in Avengers number 200, which sees Ms. Marvel leaving the series for a while to go live in limbo with Marcus, her child / lover. It is, in my opinion, a very unfortunate story. Thankfully, it's not where the volume ends. There are 2 more issues after that grossness. Issue 201 begins on a much lighter note, starting with the cover, featuring Jarvis standing in front of an assembled group of Avengers, including Iron Man, Thor, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Captain America, and the Beast, looking like a badass holding a vacuum cleaner like it's a semi-auto, and saying, "Stand back, Avengers, this is where Jarvis takes over." This is actually a pretty serious issue. Written by Michelini and illustrated by George Perez, it is the beginning of a return of an Avengers villain who you have definitely seen before, who is a very scary character, always dangerous, always destructive, and always evocative of the Avengers' worst own personal mistakes. That said, it's only a 14-page story because part 2 of this issue is a Jarvis standalone story. Written by Michelini and Roger Stern with art by George Perez. It sees Jarvis visiting his mum, only to find out that she and her village are being terrorized by a local bully, and like all good superhero butlers, Jarvis unveils his secret badassery, kicks the bully's ass, saves the day, and is given great Yorkshire pudding by his mum as a reward for his bravery. Good show. Issue 202 is where Ultron takes center stage, again written by Michelini and art by George Perez, and it's one of many amazing Avengers vs. Ultron stories. This one, not least of which, has emotional resonance because, like many of the best Ultron stories, it involves Ultron facing off with a team of Avengers that includes his own bastard son, the Vision. It's a great end to the Ultron storyline, and from there we get 2 mini-stories, just capping off the events of the Avengers' lives around this time in Marvel history. There's a Wonder Man story from Marvel Premiere number 55, in which Wonder Man makes some powerful enemies in the form of the Magia. That's right, Marvel used to have to call their group of organized crime the Magia because the actual Mafia was so badass and scary at the time that Marvel executives, editors, and creatives really believed that if they portrayed the Mafia, even in a fictional manner, they'd get a horse head in their bed, or maybe they'd get whacked or something. So the Magia versus Wonder Man in this story. Written by Michelini and Bob Layton, with art by Ron Wilson. Lastly, we get a Vision story from Tales to Astonish number 12 from November of 1980, written by Tom DeFalco, penciled by John Fuller. This is a classic Vision story in which his robot efficiency and human compassion seem to be at war with one another, but in fact complement each other quite nicely, as he faces off against a team of terrorists who are planning to assassinate a foreign diplomat, and at the same time he needs to save the life of one of the passengers aboard this diplomat's flight, who's having a heart attack. And because he's a badass, well, let's just say he doesn't have to choose between his actions. He's the Vision. He gets a lot of things done at one time. He's a multitasker, as it were. So Marvel Masterworks Avengers Volume 19 is a classic and very highly recommended new to you comic book day release. It's already been released and it's available now on Amazon. Again, the affiliate link will be in the description. Thanks as always. If you'd like to contribute to this podcast, links are in the description, as are my social media profiles, and of course a link to my website. I hope you enjoyed both the book and my review of it, and I'll talk to you soon.